not going to throw your line off as much as your eye is. There is some truth to it, but you got to have all those other basics covered first before you can just blame it all on the grain.
Welcome to the ATL Golfs Podcast.
Welcome back to the ATL Golfs Podcast. This is episode 8, and we are joined with myself, Andrew, and Joe. And in the middle, we have Ashley Young from the Fields Golf Club. Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
If you could just tell us about yourself and what you do at the Fields and your story a little bit and your background.
So I'm owner-operator here at the Fields Golf Club, LaGrange, Georgia. Also the current superintendent. Got a pretty small staff here. Public course. Hopefully some of you guys have been down here maybe. So currently everything from sometimes I have on my owner-operator hat, sometimes I have on my superintendent hat, and I think that's what we're going to talk some about today. Quick background, just grew up in the golf industry, reluctantly got into this space. My father sold turf grass equipment for Toro John Deere when I was younger, and he segued that into a career as a golf course architect. So the Fields was actually his first design, and got him started in that vein of the industry. And so I was out here when I was in 4th grade. Never thought I'd be back here running this place one day. So that was a kind of a neat, long loop to get back here. But so my background in golf kind of is around design build. Didn't go to turf grass school to do this. Studied finance and kind of took the long route back to working with my dad, and then I was able to purchase this outright about 5 or 6 years ago now, and we've been slowly fixing it up. So that's where we're at now.
The golf hero's journey, coming back around. That's awesome. And quick plug, our very first episode ever, which unfortunately is probably our worst episode because it's our first one, but we talked about Andrew going down the fields and playing, so you guys should go listen to that, check it out. And actually, props for being the guinea pig with the Fields there, because as soon as we had the episode, we realized, hey, we should have someone from the course come onto our episodes moving forward. So live and learn. But I recommend everyone head down the Fields, check it out, and we're hoping to get out there soon. So well, cool. Well, let's kind of jump in, folks. Kind of give you a framework we're gonna do today. It's gonna be a bit different than our typical course review podcast. As Ashley just talked about, he's the superintendent as well at the Fields, and a grass expert. And so what we wanted to do was provide our listeners something that can help you make better decisions when you're going to play golf courses, set better expectations for you when you're going to play golf courses, mainly around the grass and what to expect as it comes to greens and the different types of greens. And so what we're kind of going to do is go season by season and talk about the various grass types and how they're affected depending on the season and what maybe you can expect as a golfer when you go out to the different courses. And so we'll kind of take that as our framework and see where it leads us. So awesome. Well, I guess to kick things off, let's talk about the here and now. So we're here in February. The weather's kind of up and down, topsy-turvy. And maybe it's a good framework, actually, maybe just run through the most popular types of grasses that golfers are gonna run into.
All right. Let's see. I'll start out by grass expert. Might be overextending a little there, but no,
Comfortably.
Yeah. There's a lot of smart guys out there. But yeah, in Georgia, especially Atlanta area, I know you guys focus Atlanta and surrounding within a few hour drive of Atlanta. Georgia is probably one of it's a fairly large state, but widely varied. I mean, you got coastal courses down south that see very different climates than we even see in Atlanta, and then you've got all the way up into the Northeast. A friend of mine actually runs a club up there, Sky Valley Golf Club, and you actually cannot get to Sky Valley without driving into North Carolina and then back into Georgia. So he's like very top corner. And That kind of segues into grass. There's only two. That course there at Sky Valley is all bent grass, so tee to green. There's only two courses in the state like that. The other one's up in that same area, and it's got the elevation and the climate where they can do that. So most of your other courses throughout the state are going to be warm season grasses. So you got warm season, cool season. So that's going to be your Bermudas. That's probably the dominant turf type around most of Georgia. Zoysia is getting more and more popular. So you've got some of your higher end clubs. You've got Zoysia fairways, little different, surface texture on those, little different inputs and everything. So most of those are going to be warm season grasses. Most of your greens now you're playing on are same thing. We're some type of Bermuda. Back in the day, they were kind of dwarf Bermudas, they called them. So it's smaller plant, good for golf greens. Then bent grass kind of was coming along in the South, and a lot of people were growing bent grass greens. And then Ralph Keppel at Eastlake actually kind of pioneered. He was the first major course to put in, and first one in tournament play, I believe, on the PGA for an ultra dwarf Bermuda green. And people kind of saw how good that surface could be. And he had some of the best greens on tour every year per the players. And so, especially in Atlanta area, that really kicked off a lot of clubs that used to say, hey, we can only go bent grass, switching over to some of these ultra dwarfs. Still do have some people hanging on around Atlanta area with bent grass greens. And probably this season that we're talking about right now is where you're going to see the biggest difference. So those ultra dwarf Bermudas and your dwarf Bermudas are dormant right now, probably especially coming out of this weather that we're having. As you go further south, they might start seeing some color right now. Whereas your bent grass greens are going to be kicking. They love this weather, and it's kind of why they stage the Masters when they stage it. April's kind of when those cool season grasses, their rye overseed peaks, their bent grass greens kind of peak. So right now, Bermuda turf's going through a transition in the next 6 weeks. So as we get these warm February days, soil temps start getting up to 55 degrees. These warmer nights, you'll start to see the Bermuda green up, but it's still not growing. And that's when you kind of have this transitional change in those Bermuda greens, where even in your high-end clubs, you might see some variation. They're trying to get that start getting a high to cut established. And so you're going to see a big difference in your Bermuda greens and your if you're fortunate enough to have somewhere to play on bent grass greens this time of year, the bent grass will, much greener surface, maybe a truer surface in that transition period. Right now, Bermuda greens are still really fast, so you go some places they're going to be screaming. But as we move into the transition season now and into March and coming up is when you see a lot of your winter weed pressure too. Some people will be talking about POA on the greens and all that stuff. We even have some here. It's really hard to manage the chemistries with that weed. So if you're at your local course and you see a little POA out there right now, don't beat them up too bad. It's going to go away as the heat comes, as the Bermuda starts growing. You'll grow out of it, and it's going to look completely different coming into that later spring season.
Nice. So I guess a couple examples then for folks that maybe are new to new to the game or just new to even thinking about grass. So a good example for like Bermuda greens would be like Bobby Jones. It's probably the most popular one around Atlanta. And there's a bunch of still bent grass greens around. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I know like St. Marlowe's bent grass, Heritage is bent grass. I don't know what technically the city courses are.
I don't think there's grass on some of those.
Not good grass.
Yeah. Packed down mud.
Yeah. But and then actually, you happen to know of any courses that are using the you said the dwarf Bermuda?
Ultra dwarf Bermuda. I've never even heard of that. That's cool.
Yeah, so
sometimes I call Andrew an ultra dwarf because he's so short.
All right, I'm 4'10". All right, I can escape these allegations one day.
Even here near us, Callaway Gardens still has some dwarf greens. It's a good grass. It was used a lot in the 80s. It's not as they kind of look at it in Bermuda like plants per square foot. So each little shoot, you're going to have a little rougher texture, but it's still a good grass, especially at a public place. It can take a lot of abuse. You might not be able, you're not going to get it up to that standard that they have at like East Lake with the ultra dwarf. So the ultra dwarf is kind of a variant of that grass where it's a little finer bladed. There's more plants per square foot. So you're kind of getting towards that bent grass kind of texture in season. It's really stays firm. It's going to have some grain to it if they don't manage the grain correctly. You can get a little grain in there. I personally think grain's a little of a loose term people throw around. And then you've got all kinds of variants of bent grass as well that are they'll seed into those things. But those are your main types. Your dwarf Bermudas, it's a little more coarse. Probably still around on some older courses. They're not really planning it nowadays on a newer place if you're redoing something. So most of what you're going to see at your better greens are going to be either an ultra dwarf Bermuda, which is when you hear somebody say Tiff Eagle. We have champions here at the fields. Those are probably two of the biggest ones. Tiff Eagle is probably the biggest variant around the state. And you've got a few others that are out there that aren't quite as common. And then your bent grasses.
Got it. So to kind of recap, this time of year, kind of cooler months, bent grass is going to be kind of in prime time, and Bermuda is in a bit more of a transition, you could say, period. So moving into so for golfers at home listening to this, if you see bent grass greens, it's probably going to be a good time to get out there and play at those courses. And then for the Bermuda greens, just know that it just is what it is. They're a bit more transition.
They're still good. They're fast. They're firm this time of year. You can be a little more receptive on your bent grass this time of year.
Here you go. So moving into, like you kind of alluded to, the Masters and springtime and that sort of thing. So, well, how do these grasses start to change and evolve as we get into the spring and warmer months and more rain and everything else that comes with that?
Yeah, as it warms up, your Bermudas you're gonna start seeing color on them first before you really get growth. Once you start getting some growth, you start doing your top dressing, all those kind of things, grooming them. That's when that surface really starts getting better as you come into May and June kind of months. Your bent grasses are great through that season as well. Again, that's why they're playing the Masters when they play it, and the FedEx Cups at the end of the year when Bermuda is awesome in the fall. So yeah, you'll start to see your Bermudas kind of catch up. They're able to again groom them. You're going to start actually mowing grass then. Water them a little more. They'll become a little less firm than they were throughout the winter, so a little more receptive there. And your bent grasses are going to keep on cruising through the spring.
We talked a little bit about you mentioned kind of grain there offhand. I think that's something that people hear sometimes, and you kind of alluded to. You think they know what you're talking about, but oftentimes don't. So, if you're talking to a golfer who doesn't know what grain means, or what's some things that are some simple things they can know about it to maybe help themselves on Bermuda greens, play those greens smarter, and to better, hopefully shoot better scores and putt a little bit better.
Yeah, so a lot of times grain is referring to kind of how the grass lays, so it's standing straight up ideally. So sometimes the grain will be going. Bermuda grows from kind of a root, a rhizome that's there, and then the plant kind of comes off little nodes in that, whereas bent grass is like coming from one seed growing straight up. And so you've kind of got this network of roots underneath the Bermuda, and if it's not managed correctly, it can kind of overlap like shingles. A lot of times as a golfer, just if you don't know much about grass, a lot of times the grain is going downhill, so it'll be going anyway because the water is kind of taking the grass and taking it that way. It also follows the sun, so wherever that east-west is, if you're out there in the afternoon, if a green's getting a lot of afternoon sun, it could be leaning the plant that way. A good cheater way, if you're on some Bermuda greens, if you go look at the cup and you see the edge of the cup, one edge of the cup's going to be really clean, and probably on an older hole, one edge of the cup's going to be like a little eroded almost, like maybe a little fuzzier, so that really clean side's going to be on your down grain side because you're cutting off the edge where that root is, and that place that's falling off, you're at the top edge of it. So the grain's going to be moving towards that kind of dirty side of the cup, and that so you can kind of look at it and see where the grain is. But you can have grain on one green might be going a couple of directions, so that hole check is really going to do you for around those close putts. But if you got a 40-footer, got to look at it. But the grain's probably not going to throw your line off as much as your eye is. There is some truth to it, but you got to have all those other basics covered first before you can just blame it all on the grain.
Dang.
Yeah, but it's so much easier.
That's what I was trying to do. I was like, oh, that's why I miss all those putts.
Right. Don't take away our excuses, but
yeah, the grain doesn't play too much, I guess.
Yeah, but so just to kind of reiterate a couple things there for folks. So, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Ashley, but so once you've identified, what the grain's doing, where it's going, there's a couple things to keep in mind there for a newer golfer. One, if you're putting into the grain, so the grass is towards you or growing towards you,
yes,
it's going to slow down your putt.
Slow down,
and depending on the length, it could slow down quite a bit. And then the opposite is true. So if you're down grain, which you've played golf with people, you've probably heard that phrase, it's going to be much faster. And that's the challenge and sometimes the fun of Bermuda greens, is trying to take all that into account before you hit your putt.
You can take that same thing too when you're chipping. If you've got some tight chips around the green, you can pay attention to that same grain structure as well. And if your club face is going into the grain, you've got a lot. You might want to open that up, use that bounce a little more, because you're not going to be digging into that grain. And then if it's the opposite, it's going to be real easy to get under that ball. So you can pay attention to that grain too when you've got some tight chips around the green.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
One thing I've always done is, because to your point, around the cup can help around the cup, but things can change. So I know for me, a lot of times what I'm doing is, especially chips, because obviously if you're chipping into the grain, when it lands, it's going to stop a lot faster too. If you got some spin on it, it's going to want to check up more. And again, the opposite is true. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll figure out where my landing spot is, or where I hope my landing spot is, and I'll just use my hand. If you rub your hand on the green, you can kind of feel, okay, is this smooth and going down grain, or is it rough and am I chipping into the grain? And that's kind of something I do to try to give myself a better idea of which way it's going.
Yeah, you can definitely feel it, very much so.
Cool. Well, let's head into our summer months. And I imagine the early summers, and just based off what I've heard and experienced, the beginning of the summer is a little bit different than the end of the summer. So maybe we'll especially as far as some of the bent grass greens as it gets hotter and hotter throughout the summer. But what's how does that kind of evolve and change as we continue on through the June, July, August times?
Yeah, so as you come out of the spring, I mean, both your Bermudas and your bent grasses are doing pretty well. Not a lot of aggressive growth yet on the Bermuda, and the bent grass is still pretty happy. So I'd say the shoulder seasons, both spring and fall, not to jump ahead to fall, but both of those grasses do well in the shoulder seasons. And then as you move into the summer, that's when you start to see a big difference. And probably one of the main reasons a lot of courses made the switch to Bermuda in the South. A lot of bent grass managers in the summertime in Georgia, I mean, when you start hitting those 100-degree days and a lot of evaporation and just heat, they're not managing that plant anymore to grow it. They're trying to keep that thing alive, especially at a busy place with a lot of foot traffic and whatnot. So that's when I think too, as a golfer, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, I don't like Bermuda because it's not as receptive. It's not actually the grass. Sometimes you go play a bent grass course in the heat of the summer, they're hand watering that thing. They're watering a lot just to syringe the greens, keep the surface temps down. So the actual surface underneath is pretty moist. So you'll get these big ball marks, and people will be like, oh, that green's receptive. Well, it's just soft because it's wet. So you fire something in there, it's going to stick. It's not really the grass, it's more of a soil moisture thing. Whereas Bermuda loves the heat. So in the summer, you can actually get really aggressive on height of cut with Bermuda, fertilization, really pushing that grass. That's why you see a lot of people aerify their Bermuda greens. You're more going into June and that kind of stuff. Whereas in the fall, they might be aerifying your bent grass. So you're trying to, all those kind of practices, that's another thing to kind of think about when you're going to play a course. So a lot of people are like, when do you aerify? So different times of year that you're aerifying a Bermuda green or a bent grass green. So a lot of times they'll go spring and fall, and your Bermudas are being aerified in the summertime when they're growing the most. But so the Bermuda in the summertime, it's those greens start to get really good. If anything, superintendents are using tools like growth regulators that actually slow the growth of the top growth of the plant down, trying to keep that afternoon sun from growing. And if that's another thing too, just when you're booking tee times and you see differences in pricing and stuff at golf courses, like when you're the first tee time out, that green's just been mowed. It's growing throughout the day, and most of its growth's done by the afternoon. It's not really growing in the evening. So if you're that last tee time getting that twilight rate, part of that is that people have been on it all day. That grass is now grown throughout the day. So that green's going to be a little slower in the afternoon, especially in the summertime on both of those grass types. So you're going to probably have some faster greens if you got that morning tee time versus that afternoon tee time. And but the Bermuda in the summer is a lot less stressful to manage. It can take a lot more foot traffic at these busy Atlanta courses. So you're going to start seeing possibly some decline at a busy course in a bent grass in the summertime. Expect it to be a little more receptive. Your Bermudas, they're going to be a little easier to manage in that heat. So a lot of managers have moved away from that because you can lose a bent grass green if you're not a good superintendent in some of these hot summer weeks that we have in Georgia.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I've even heard it with last August. There was a handful of private courses where people were telling me like, "Hey, Joe, you need posts about this course and that course. Like, don't go there right now. It's bad. It's like real bad," because they were bent grass and like you said, we're just totally soft and got beat up, and you're just waiting basically for the temps to cool down. There's a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned before, a lot of courses are starting to make the switch. And I'm assuming not to make this climate change conversation, but the fact is like, things have continuously gotten hotter in Georgia, basically, because I think there's like a line of sort of demarcation for like where bent grass is good or not, depending on temperature and climate and that sort of thing, right? And I guess it used to be more in probably Tennessee, and now it's probably closer to Atlanta even. But yeah, what have you looked at some of the stats and data on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't think, we've always had these, it could be definitely, it's real, a few degrees hotter, but you've got Georgia, especially Tennessee, they're hard places to grow grass because we have these massive temperature fluctuations. As you guys know, a lot of greens in the Atlanta area, we were covered for over a week, 2 weeks ago, and it's in the 70s this week. We literally in 48 hours went from 14-degree low to 65 degrees. And so you're managing these huge temperature swings, where in Florida, they're growing Bermuda grass and it's warm all year. It never even goes into dormancy. Up in the Northeast, where you have some of these awesome courses we hear about in Michigan, New York, all these places, they're closed this time of year. There's snow covering the greens. So they're not trying to stay open year round and manage that. And so I think one of the things that's happened to golf is it's just become more popular, and people's expectations because of TV. because of what you can do with turf grass. So you go play your buddy's private club and you play at prime time and you see that, and then you're comparing that to, your place down the street. Even those private clubs have a time of the year they peak and don't peak, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
And I think people's expectations now, especially as newer golfers are getting into it and might not have experienced that even their first full season yet, they just kind of think it's a static thing of like, hey, this is what it's like all year. And people really have to understand it's a seasonal thing, especially in these states like Tennessee and Georgia. So you've got to think about that, which is why you're doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think expectations have changed a lot, and a lot of courses didn't used to see that much play. So in the summertime, the clubs just kind of knew, hey, the green's this time of year and it's hot and they're doing something else. And now they've got pressure all year round to put golfers on that course. And your public places and your city-owned courses, same thing. They're trying to keep that place open, and you're putting bodies out there. So I think people's expectations, they're expecting a lot more of a golf course. There's more people out there. And even places like Augusta National, people don't realize that was built as a snowbird course. It was built so that people are flying down from New York or taking the train down. They're playing their golf down here because their home club is closed in the wintertime. And then Augusta closes in the summer. So even some of these high-end elite places that can push grass to its max, just like, hey, we're closed part of the year, because it's not there. And so when you have a lot of the courses, you guys are doing an awesome job of showcasing like public golf, like that's a different model, and they've got to stay open year round to stay alive. So I think it's awesome you're doing this because people, throughout the season, that's going to be different. But to answer your question, I think a lot of it has to do with people's expectations and more people on these golf courses, why they're making the switch rather than just straight climate change. Because to the grass, it's kind of lived in that range still for a very long time.
Makes sense. Yeah, and it's one that I think people should embrace it a little bit, and I'm preaching to myself a little bit. Golf, you're not on a basketball court. You're not in a baseball diamond and sort of a very controlled atmosphere. It's nature. It's one of the coolest parts about golf. You're in nature. You're dealing with roots and random grass and bushes and tree limbs and embrace it. I when I go to Florida and play some of those courses, I'm almost like, this feels too sterile. It almost feels
too
like
nice.
Yeah, it's like, this is too. Where's my leaves? Where's the trees?
Where's my dirt patch?
Yeah. But no, that's good. Well, let's see. We just have I think we have pretty much the fall left. So, yeah, going into the fall, that's my favorite time of year to play. I think just in general. But what happens, or how does that Bermuda or not Bermuda? Sorry, the bent grass. How does that shift happen? Like, what's actually happening that makes these bent grass greens almost seemingly from month to month go from early August awful to like by the end of September they're like prime, they're getting aerated, they're like getting really, really nice. Like what's actually happening there going into fall for these grasses?
Mainly soil temperatures there and surface temps. So those cool season grasses like bent grass, I mean it kind of thrives in that spring and fall time weather. So when it gets too cold, they're not doing much growing. When it gets too hot, they're stressed, they're not doing much growing. So the shoulder seasons of spring and fall, they're in that sweet spot to where that plant can really chemically do things and use nitrogen and use its inputs, and it's growing new turf. And that's what you want to maintain those greens, so you're getting that fresh cut every morning. So you got to be kind of actively growing some turf to be able to manage it and keep that surface. So in the wintertime when it's not growing as much, or in the summer when it's stressed, you're not able to push it as hard on those surfaces. So that's why it gets nicer in the spring and fall on the bents. And they'll do things too, like bent grass can get poana in it just like Bermuda greens can, which is poana is also a cool season grass. It's the most studied weed right now at both the turf schools of University of Georgia and Auburn, which are both big warm season research facilities. Then you'll have greens out in California that are all POA. And that POA this time of year, you'll have it in the fall on some bent, and you don't really see it. It's mixed in there, but when it gets to this time of the year we're in right now, which is why golfers see it a lot, it's getting stressed because it starts to warm up. So it goes to seed. So when plants get under stress, that's kind of when they flower and bloom, go to seed, and try to make that next year's crop. So same thing's happening to the bent in the fall. It's kind of thriving and it's getting ready for winter. So it's storing up nutrients in its roots, and it's really pushing itself and preparing itself for that winter cycle.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I think what would be cool, Andrew, is maybe we can create a little cheat sheet for people to download, like that kind of walks people through some of this information that, gives them updates on, okay, here's where these greens are most likely going to be aerated, depending on what they are.
Play here during this time.
Yeah, I mean, we can do play here, but just a general like greens cheat sheet for folks of when it's prime time, when it's, just again, it's about the expectation setting, like, okay, I'm going to this course. I know the greens, it's early August. I know they're bent grass. My expectations are set accordingly. I'm not going in expecting, lightning, whatever.
I think talking about the grass, setting real expectations, because like initially when I first started golfing, it was during prime time. It was like spring and then summer, and I was like, man, every course is awesome. And then I experienced my first fall/winter, and then my first like initial spring, and I was like, man, golf kind of sucks. Just everything else, I was like, man, like my expectations were so high because of when I started golfing. It was during the playing season, and then I realized the reality of how golf really is. It's like it ebbs and flows. Things change, and it's a plant. It's a living species, and so it all depends on how the weather is and how it's maintained. I think it's interesting that you talk about how when plants go under stress, that it's the survivability. They flower and they bloom. I have a couple plants at my house where I've had a snake plant where it bloomed, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I Googled it, and it's because it was under a lot of stress and it was trying to survive. And I thought it was pretty, but I was like, oh man, I kind of neglected this plant to bloom. And so really interesting to kind of set the expectations of what to expect when you get out on the golf course.
Yeah, and another thing, my dad's always said this to me, and I don't think he came up with it. It came from somewhere, I think overseas, Scotland or somewhere, but they're a lot better over there at playing. If you think about it, you're playing golf on a surface, not a color. A lot of new golfers, a lot of stuff from TV, or you go out to a place and you're like, wow, this is in good shape because it's nice and green. If you notice right now, even the term they just played out, the waste management, some of those guys were having fits with the ryegrass. It looks great on TV, but right now it's thriving out there, and they're watering that, and it's hot, and so afternoons this ryegrass is really going, and they're trying to nip these wedges around the greens, and they're getting caught. Mm-hmm. So like they would actually, a lot of those tour players would rather that place be brown, and because they like those tight lies and they can really get in there and nip the ball and make contact. But if you showed that on TV, somebody's gonna go, what's wrong with that golf course? So as a golfer, if you're like, hey, I'm playing on a surface, not a color. So then in the wintertime, those Bermuda greens are dormant, but they actually roll really good. You're seeing a lot of guys now start to dye them, or guys and gals, I shouldn't say it, but dye those greens. And then same thing, the bent grass, sometimes it looks awesome and it's green, but it's really lush and it slows them down. So I think all golf, if you're kind of thinking about it as what's the surface like, and not just looking at it from a color standpoint or as aesthetic standpoint.
Yeah, good point. I think that's true, and we're all guilty of that. And I think things will. It's funny because I think people that have been golfing for a while don't care as much about, okay, it's green, and because well, they dyed it. Like it's just it's pure aesthetics. Yeah, whereas again, kind of going back to the sort of natural aspects of golf that I think are part of its allure. You lose a little bit of that if everything's just dyed green. I don't know. It's never natural looking. It's always, it gets on your ball. It's just annoying.
It's like the steak effect. Like you go to the grocery store and all the steaks are bright red, but if you're a cook and you know meat, you know that it's like just because it's a little brown or gray on the outside doesn't mean it's gone bad. So it's just a visual thing for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, cool. Actually, we'll I think that's a good spot. Make this a shorter, kind of punchy episode, helping people out. I think we'll probably do more with you in the future on some different topics, and maybe get more nitty gritty on the grass as the year progresses. But I think this is something that's going to help every golfer. And we'll create a little PDF that people can download in the show notes below. And we'll put your logo on it as well. So we'll give you some.
Get a hand. Let me know.
Yeah, and
awesome. I'm glad y'all did it in general. But yeah, I'd say overall, if you got buddies coming in from out of town, they haven't been to Georgia, tell them to come play golf in the fall. I think bent grass or Bermuda grass, that's when everything is fall golf around here is some of the best golf that we have.
Other than the
and right, just be patient. And next few months are going to really take off for golf in Georgia. So appreciate what you guys are doing. It's pretty cool seeing.
Yeah. Well, appreciate what you're doing. All right. Thanks.
What's up, everyone? So quick update on the ATL Golfs Pass. I'm really excited to announce that we've developed 3 partnerships to give a little bit more value out of the Golf Pass. Number 1, Renegade Golf Balls, which is a local Atlanta-based golf ball company. You now get a $15 gift card on a dozen of their balls, so helping you guys get some more balls this season. Second thing is with Cody Carter, who is the head teaching pro out of Druid Hills and widely considered, if not the best, one of the best teachers in Georgia. You get 50% off a first month of online lessons with him, which could be upwards of $125 value. So more than the Golf Pass cost at $95. And then literally just this week, we partnered up with US Am Tour, and you get $40 off a membership with the US Am Tour. So instead of the typical $139, it's going to be $99 for those that have the Golf Pass. And so literally, if you just use that, what the extra value, the Golf Pass is paid for itself before you've even played your first round. And so we're going to continue adding more things to it. I'm in some talks right now with some private courses. And so we're going to keep making it awesome. But again, limited availability. I think we're down to under 130 now. And so make sure you snag those at shop.atlgolfs.com. Thanks.
Well, Joe, that was super interesting. I kind of just sat there and listened a lot.
I know. Sorry, dude. I didn't mean to kind of take it over, but whatever.
No, I didn't mind it. I was like really, my mouth, I think my mouth was open 90% of that because it was super interesting.
You had some good facial expressions for sure.
Before we got into this episode, I had a bunch of questions typed up, and Joe was like, dude, no one's going to care about this stuff. And I was like, I care. Trust me, I care. But to the average Joe, to the average listener, it's probably not.
Hey, you're not allowed to say average Joe.
sorry. That's very Joeist of me. But I mean, just super interesting stuff. I think knowing about some of this stuff you just hear from other people about the grain and this and that. So it's nice to bring in someone that's, he doesn't call himself an expert, but he's definitely more of an expert than most of us. And so the fact that he was able to clarify and, bring up, an expert about this stuff was really interesting. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Hopefully people can get a little bit extra knowledge. Maybe they'll have a better experience on their Bermuda greens and learn how to read them a bit better, at least know where the grain's going. So we talked about that a bit, which I thought would be helpful. And then, just having better expectations about what grass is doing and when, and understanding that. And in some ways, like I said, embrace it. Embrace the fact that we're dealing with live, real things that go through seasons. It's just reality, and it's not bad. It's not good. It's just different.
Totally agree. Well, short and sweet episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Laters.
Peace.